It was the fifth wave of U.S. Marines hitting the beach on Iwo Jima. Sherman tanks rolled off their landing craft, but 8 of them, though identical from the outside, were anything but ordinary. These 8 would account for nearly a third of all Japanese casualties, achieving that through the most horrifying means imaginable. They were flame tanks. Their crews played a massive role in securing victory, but some paid a terrible price for wielding such a weapon. From the moment humans learned to control fire, they found new ways to use it against one another, usually in the most dreadful ways possible. One of the earliest and most infamous examples was Greek fire, essentially the world's first flamethrower. This was a pressurized burning mixture the Byzantines unleashed in naval battles to spray enemy ships with flame so potent that water couldn't extinguish it. To this day, no one truly knows the exact formula, and its reputation as one of history's most feared weapons remains unbroken. Across centuries, fire repeatedly found its way onto battlefields, sometimes through methods that now seem almost insane, like pigs or other animals being set ablaze and sent running toward enemy lines to sow panic. But the modern flamethrower, the kind we recognize today, didn't emerge until World War I. It was the Germans who first deployed it, another desperate attempt to shatter the stalemate of trench warfare. When the Flammenwerfer spewed fire across no man's land for the first time, Allied soldiers were less shocked by its lethality than by its terrifying spectacle. Initially, it served more as a psychological weapon than a practical one. Yet the gruesome effect it had on the human body soon solidified its fearsome reputation. Flamethrowers were notoriously dangerous for their own operators. There were numerous cases of German squads perishing from their own weapons due to sudden wind changes. Early attempts to mount these systems on tanks also occurred during World War I, but they saw little success. After the conflict, most nations dismissed flamethrowers as relics of a bygone era. That would all change once the Americans found themselves fighting in the Pacific. And the reason for that transformation soon became horrifyingly clear. Before we get to the tanks, we need to understand the handheld flamethrowers that came first. On the eve of the Second World War, the Allies possessed a few prototypes, but enthusiasm for them was scarce. There were no dedicated flamethrower units, and the weapon appeared only sporadically in rare circumstances. That changed when reports surfaced of German troops effectively employing flamethrowers in assaults. Those reports forced American planners back to the drawing board. A new round of handheld designs was rushed into production, arriving long before any flame tanks rolled off landing craft. Handheld flamethrowers were paradoxical, both ingenious and horrifying. They could do what rifles and grenades couldn't: clear enemy positions by literally burning them out. Grenades could accomplish similar results, but once you see how the fortifications on Iwo Jima were built, it's clear why the flamethrower often became the only viable solution. The U.S. military developed the M1 flamethrower, a backpack-style system with a nozzle the operator could aim wherever destruction was required. It carried 2 fuel tanks containing about 5 gallons of flammable mixture, plus a smaller central tank of compressed nitrogen gas to propel the liquid in a jet that reached roughly 20 to 40 yards, its maximum range. Fully loaded, the weapon weighed about 70 pounds and could deliver 7 to 10 seconds of continuous flame. The fuel mixture was ignited at the nozzle. Early models used unreliable electrobatteries, later replaced with a pyrotechnic ignition system employing white phosphorus flares that burned long enough to light the stream. The operators projected a mixture of diesel, gasoline, and napalm compound, creating a sticky, blazing substance that burned around 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, adhering to whatever it touched. Operators soon learned a brutal but effective tactic. Spray the target first without igniting it. Let the mixture seep deep into the fortification, then ignite the next burst, turning everything inside into an inferno. The flamethrower's advantage in clearing pillboxes over conventional weapons lay in physics. Explosions or shrapnel from grenades could only kill those directly struck, and Japanese fortifications were intentionally designed to deflect grenade blasts. often dug in zigzag patterns with grenade channels to kick away incoming explosives. But a flamethrower worked differently. The flames didn't need to strike the soldiers directly. The heat consumed oxygen within the bunker, suffocating or roasting everyone inside. Even those spared direct contact were overcome by the lack of breathable air and unbearable heat. We won't delve too deeply into the physiological horrors of flamethrower injuries. Many wartime studies debated whether such deaths were too inhumane, describing them as either instantaneous or the most excruciating imaginable. Judging from battlefield accounts, the latter seems closer to the truth. The screams echoing from caves on Iwo Jima leave little doubt. That's why the flamethrower became the ultimate solution for those stubborn Japanese pillboxes that refused to yield. Imagine this: 70 pounds strapped to your back, forcing you to crawl within hand grenade range to be effective. Your oddly shaped backpack makes you an obvious target. The enemy knows exactly what will happen if you get close, so every weapon in their arsenal is aimed squarely at you. Even when empty, you still carry 45 pounds while retreating, your position betrayed by the roaring fire and the chilling screams of those trapped inside the bunkers you've just incinerated. That was the reality for flamethrower operators, and the reason 94% of them didn't survive Iwo Jima. The first large-scale American use of flamethrowers against Japanese troops came during the Solomon Islands campaign. Their commanders quickly recognized the operators' extreme vulnerability. Someone proposed merging the flamethrower's power with a tank's armor, solving both protection and mobility problems. Thus began the experimental era of flame tanks. These initial conversions used the M3 Stuart light tank fitted with a modified backpack flamethrower system and earned the grim nickname Satan tanks. Their range roughly doubled compared with the foot-carried models, and they could sustain about 40 seconds of continuous fire. In practice, however, they proved notoriously unreliable. Combat failures occurred in roughly 4 out of 10 engagements. The Stuart's light armor offered scant protection beyond small arms fire, and the added flamethrower gear cramped turret movement and overloaded the already limited internal space. Still, when a Satan tank reached its target and functioned as intended, its ability to neutralize fortifications was obvious. Those results persuaded U.S. commanders that the idea was worth pursuing and perfecting. Only 5 months before the planned Iwo Jima assault, engineers assembled a dedicated team to learn from earlier mishaps and build a robust, combat-ready flame tank. They chose the M4A3 Sherman as the base platform. The conversion was extensive. Each unit required roughly 1,200 man-hours, about 150 pounds of welding rod, over 1,000 electrical connections, and roughly 150 specialized components. The Sherman's main gun was removed and replaced by a flame projector fed from tanks carrying approximately 300 gallons of fuel mixture, enough to hurl a stream of fire out to about 150 yards for some 80 seconds of continuous discharge. Refueling the system, however, was slow. Crews needed roughly 2 hours to prepare the tank for another sustained firing cycle. The fuel itself had its quirks. It had to be used within 72 hours of preparation or it would thicken and clog the plumbing. Mechanically, the modified turret could traverse about 270 degrees, with elevation and depression similar to a standard Sherman. Externally, the vehicle looked like any other Sherman, a crucial detail that would soon give Japanese defenders no warning of the inferno contained within. A single Sherman conversion cost the equivalent of roughly $350,000 in today's money, and 8 of these flame Shermans were ready for the assault on Iwo Jima. The Japanese, fully aware of the island's strategic value, had spent a year transforming the volcanic terrain into an almost unassailable fortress. The island's soft volcanic rock was deceptively easy to dig by hand, producing some 11 miles of tunnels, 5,000 caves and underground chambers, and about 1,500 reinforced concrete positions across an area of 8 square miles. Roughly 21,000 men prepared to make a last, determined stand defending their homeland. General Tadamaki Kurobayashi, understanding that his force faced near certain death, issued orders that removed the possibility of retreat or resupply. He abandoned the futile bonsai charges of earlier battles in favor of a meticulous defense aimed at maximizing American losses, hoping that the price paid might deter an invasion of the home islands. Soldiers were told to die only after taking at least 10 Americans with them. The U.S. Navy and Army bombarded Iwo Jima for 74 consecutive days, delivering over 6,800 tons of bombs and more than 22,000 shells. Yet Allied intelligence wildly underestimated the defenders, believing only about 4,000 troops held the island when, in reality, some 21,000 were dug in. Worse, planners assumed the pre-invasion bombardment had neutralized the defenses and ceased the pounding prematurely. As the Marines approached the beaches on February 19, 1945, they had no idea that only about 200 of the island's 1,500 fortifications had been destroyed. The bulk of the Japanese force waited in an extensive, largely intact tunnel network, poised to fight in ways the Americans had not fully imagined. Intact tunnel network, poised to fight in ways the Americans had not fully imagined. Initial landings seemed almost deceptively calm. Then violence erupted. By nightfall on the first day, the Marines had gained less than 700 yards while suffering approximately 2,400 casualties. The real test, however, was only beginning. Unbeknownst to Japanese defenders, 8 Flame Shermans had landed with the U.S. force. Because they were irreplaceable and expensive, commanders held them in reserve for 24 hours before committing them. On the morning of the second day, the tanks went forward. The first to see action supported Marines pinned down near Motoyama Airfield. Flame Sherman 431 closed to roughly 100 yards from a pillbox and fired. A Japanese 47mm anti-tank gun hit the Sherman. The shell glanced off, and the tank answered with a 15-second burst that engulfed the position in flame, clearing the way for the infantry to advance. Within 6 hours, all 8 Flame Shermans were operating, hosing one pillbox after another with flaming fuel and sending Japanese defenders in a panic. Many abandoned positions when the tanks closed in. That was only the start. As fighting intensified, the Marines finally possessed a weapon capable of destroying fortifications that had shrugged off even heavy naval bombardment. The effects were brutal and unforgettable. Flame tank crews often came within eyesight of their targets and saw plainly the results of their work. Marines followed roughly 50 yards behind the Flame Shermans to mop up anything that survived. Regular Shermans maintained suppressive fire close alongside to shield the flame tanks as they moved into range. The burning mixture seeped through every entrance and ventilation shaft. In many cases, the Japanese had stored tons of ammunition and fuel inside their tunnel complexes. When the burning mixture reached these caches, violent secondary explosions detonated underground, killing those inside and burying others in collapsing chambers. American troops frequently sealed tunnel mouths with demolition charges, effectively entombing survivors. From above, soldiers sometimes heard distant rifle shots and muffled grenade detonations, sounds indicating men trapped and still fighting in vain. Even higher positions and cliff tops were not safe. Flame tank crews angled projectors on uneven ground to fire above normal elevation limits and reach positions the Japanese believed sheltered. One account even describes defenders leaping from cliffs rather than be burned alive. Facing such terror, Japanese troops reacted with desperate countermeasures. Conventional 47mm anti-tank guns found little success against Sherman frontal armor, so some Japanese defenders resorted to suicide attacks, running at tanks with explosives strapped to their bodies. Most of these attackers were cut down before reaching their targets, but some succeeded in inflicting deadly damage. On March 11th, Flame Sherman 438 was destroyed when a Japanese soldier detonated himself against the tank's engine compartment, killing 3 crewmen. General Kurabashi wrote that the special flame tanks inflicted more damage than all prior bombardments and artillery combined, and that the Japanese had no effective counter. U.S. engineers worked tirelessly to keep the flame tanks functional, repairing them at night and sending them back into action. Fuel was prepared around the clock, and tanks shuttled from the front to refuel, then straight back into combat. often for days on end. Crews were utterly exhausted, but driven to push on. Their work paid tactical dividends. Flame tanks are estimated to have reduced Marine casualties by roughly 40%. By mid-March, organized Japanese resistance had largely broken, though ambushes and isolated attacks continued for weeks after the island was declared secure. On March 21st, after 30 days of intense fighting, roughly 3,000 Japanese defenders prepared one final, ghastly stand. 6 surviving original Flame Shermans were reinforced with 4 newly shipped from Hawaii, creating the largest concentration of flamethrower tanks used in the Pacific Campaign. Flame and standard Shermans advanced together, burning and blowing up positions as they went. In a single day, they consumed about 8,000 gallons of fuel mixture and suffered 92 Marines killed and 257 wounded. A heavy toll, but still significantly lower than what a conventional infantry assault would likely have produced. The assault smashed the last organized defenses. Many of the remaining defenders perished under flamethrower attack. 2 of the 8 Flame Shermans on Iwo Jima were knocked out outright, while the rest suffer malfunctions from continuous use and were cannibalized for parts to keep others running. After the battle, the surviving Flame Shermans were sent back to Hawaii for inspection and further refinement. The experience helped shape later flame tank designs, an evolution that eventually led to systems like the M67 Zippo used in later conflicts. Some Japanese soldiers who survived the tunnels emerged at night to scavenge supplies, and scattered resistance continued for a time. Out of roughly 21,000 Japanese defenders on Iwo Jima, fewer than 200 formally surrendered and survived. Most of the rest remain interred in the very tunnels they excavated. Over the course of the campaign, flamethrowers on Iwo Jima expended roughly 360,000 gallons of fuel mixture, an enormous quantity reflecting the intensity and persistence of the fighting. Every Marine who fought there agreed. Without those flame tanks, the island might not have been taken, and the casualty figures would almost certainly have been much higher. The U.S. accelerated conversion of Shermans into flame variants, ultimately preparing roughly 70 for a planned invasion of the Japanese home islands. These vehicles were also employed on Okinawa in the closing months of the war, where they consumed over 200,000 gallons of fuel mixture against entrenched defenses, testimony to a grim but undeniable tactical reality. In certain brutal claustrophobic battlefields, flamethrower tanks were tragically effective.